Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money Podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money Podcast, where we're changing the way we think about money. I'm your host, Tony Stewart, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Walt Laskos, a podcaster and elder fraud prevention advocate. In this episode, Walt will share his insights on how we rethink elder fraud prevention and better protecting our aging loved ones. Walt, welcome to the show. Thanks for being here today.
Tony, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so, can you give us a brief overview of your origin story and how you connected that to elder fraud prevention?
Well, Tony, I guess we could say it's always been communications. So get a load of this. So since I was 8 years old, when my uncle bought me an 8mm film recording camera, and I would go out and do all this videography, which I don't even think was a term at that time because there was no digital; it was all film based. So from that, all the way through to the present time when, I worked in communications at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles, the Ritz-Carlton and America's Credit Unions. It's always been communications, either it be publishing magazines or broadcasting, radio or television production or engineering microwave or satellite distributions, believe it or not, and even online streaming and webinars. The focus has always been in communications. And I guess that, in addition to all that I did in that area, both behind the camera and also in front of the camera and in front of the mics, it's always come down under the umbrella of public relations. And for me, I guess, public relations is really about informing and educating audiences. And I guess that's the kind of the foundation of what my behavior and my work is today when I look at advocating for older adults and helping them stay safe from scams and fraud. So I think that basically sets the foundation of where I'm at today.
That's awesome. And, and I think communication does play a big role in a lot of this, is having conversations and being aware. So, what caused you to be passionate about elder fraud prevention?
Well, Tony, it grew over time. I started hosting educational sessions. It's a part of my work with credit unions, educational sessions on scam prevention for older adults. And, over the course of time, doing so in Massachusetts and in New Hampshire and Rhode Island and Delaware, even a lot of the places where our cooperative credit union worked, I've met a lot of seniors, a lot of older adults. And the thing there is that when they come up to you afterwards and they start talking to you about, how much they lost in their life savings, you see an elderly woman who's like in her early 80s and confesses to you that, I lost $25,000 in a scam. I mean, my heart is like ripped out. I think any person of passion and, and of principles is going to feel the same like I did. That how you see this elderly person and this is all they have. It's not like they're 16 and they could go back to work and earn money and get another job. This is their life savings. This is what they're living on. You take that away, guess what? They're on welfare and the taxpayer now has to provide for them. And it becomes the all of us in the community that's responsible. So that kind of really, I think, pulled me into my concern for older adults and my desire to really advocate for them when it comes to scam prevention.
Yeah, I share that same passion, is seeing situations where elders, are taken advantage of, for lack of a better word, and they lose hundreds of thousands of dollars, by somebody who is their friend or some new trusted advisor. And it's not good, and unfortunately it's really common. So let's get to the root of this and define it. What exactly is elder fraud?
Well, Tony, the all the folks that are working in this, from the federal regulators to like the Federal Trade Commission, CFPB, and all, they really look at fraud being the improper use of an adult's property, their funds, and their personal information. And it's sad to say, and this really is sad to say, that a good 80 to 90% of scams and fraud against elderly people are committed by someone they know, typically a family member. And that's what's really troublesome when you think about it. One of their own in the family is the one that's scamming them and ripping them off. Last year, according to the FTC, they're saying that scams and fraud were about $12 billion in losses. That's 12 billion. And that's skyrocketing. It just climbs every year. And here's the catch to that, though, Tony. When it comes to 12 billion in losses, that's what's being reported. So just imagine all the seniors, all the folks who are too embarrassed to say that they lost $25,000, $50,000, whatever it might be. I mean, there's stories of people losing up to $500,000 in a scam, in romance scams, not reporting that. So we know that this 12 billion is really not quite accurate when it comes to the numbers. It's much, much higher than 12 billion in losses. But that's where we're dealing with scams today.
Yeah, well, and it is so unfortunate that the number is so high by people that they know. And I know, one case I can think of where, the woman didn't even realize that she was the subject of a scam with $250,000, that she was, quote unquote, moving into a life insurance policy to benefit a nonprofit. And fortunately, the nonprofit called me in to say, hey, wait a minute, because people oftentimes, what I've seen is they use nonprofits to sort of, I don't know if the right word is shield some of these scams and to sort of make them appear legitimate. And that a lot of the nonprofits at least have very qualified, competent people in their plan giving offices who are able to say, hey, wait a minute, something's not right here, and to look for warning signs. But thinking about that statistic, is what advice would you give elder people? Because part of the problem as we age is sometimes our cognitive abilities decline, some of our reasoning abilities decline, because and then they go to rely on somebody in their family to help them manage their finances.
Well, I think it comes down to, with the elderly folks, what I found, Tony, is that you have to tell them again, and tell them again. It's like any human person. Studies have shown that you have to really say something to a person about 7 times before the message starts to sink in and it clicks. So it's a basic constant repetition. The other factor that plays with older adults is what's called a window of tolerance. And doctors have pointed this out, and studies have pointed this out, that for a person that basically is not under stress, and is comfortable and everything is relaxed, their window of tolerance is very wide, and they can go on day to day without much problems. However, if someone is under stress, a lot of anxiety, think of someone that maybe just lost a husband or a wife who's elderly, and maybe they're running low on money. Maybe they're confronted with the possibility of having to go in a home or elder care. all those pressures, their window of tolerance shrinks. And studies have shown that when that window of tolerance is so shrunken, you become more susceptible to falling victim to a scammer. So I predict when you look at all the talk today about Social Security and tapping into it or eliminating it and all that, I bet you a lot of elderly folks who maybe are not that up to date with all the news that's going on are just hearing about losing Social Security, and this is their kind of lifeblood. Can you imagine the kind of stress and anxiety that they're under, which means their window of tolerance is going to shrink, which means now they're going to be perfect targets to lose money in a scam and fraud. My prediction is that we're going to see the elevation of those losses really skyrocket when next year, when it's 2026 and we look back at 2025, we're going to go, whoa, look how that's shot up the number of losses. And it's going to be because of that. So it's really, I think for older folks, it's being out there, it's guiding them, it's really encouraging family members and educating them, the kids, about scams and fraud and the role that many of them play in protecting their elderly parents or grandparents from falling victim to a scam. I think we see that a lot in a lot of Latino families, perhaps where the family lives together. You have older parents or older grandparents living there. They may not understand the technology, but the younger kids in the household do, and the responsibility then falls on their shoulders to kind of protect their loved ones.
Yeah, well, and I think that's a challenge, is that what you're talking about is that I think all this anxiety and uncertainty is going to feed the fire, because scammers, they are very good at presenting themselves as, I'm the one who can help you. I can be your rock. I have the solution.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me. And I think that's something where family members and friends can start to say, is because one of the things they do, and I'm sure you've seen this or had guests talk about this, is isolate the elder. That's a huge move that scammers do with the elderly, is they isolate them on their financial decision making, or even socially, saying, yeah, your kids don't know, what the right thing is, so you don't want to talk to them about that. That's the most common thing, is you don't want to talk to anybody else about this,
Mm-hmm.
and
that's exactly how they play it, and that because when these scam calls happen, it's like, don't say anyone, the whole bit. Like if it's the grandparent scam, and the elderly grandparent is being told that their grandchild is in jail, and they were in an accident and they hit a woman who's pregnant, and the judge is going to throw a book at them, but I could get them out of jail, and here's what you need to do, but don't say anything. And they're thoroughly coached. Oh, absolutely. And keep them isolated, keep the emotions high, so that they don't have time to think, and help and make them move quickly. Do whatever I need to have you do to get the money and get it to me quickly without thinking. That's what they want. And that's why we always advise, stop, pause for a moment, verify before you proceed to, just react and start sending money to a con artist.
Yeah, well, that's great advice. And that's great advice for people of any age, is to verify and take a breath before making any financial decision, mm-hmm. because that applies across the board. And in fact, that will help you with your spending decisions if you are spending too much money, so you can apply that across the spectrum. So, what specifically can children do to help their aging parents protect against fraud?
Well, I think it starts with staying informed on the latest scams and frauds that are happening. I think that's what we want to have young people, be aware of. Also, where to report a scam. What resources do you have? A lot of younger folks may recognize and realize, oh yeah, that's a scam, or because they too are victims of scams all the time with a lot of their online activity. So it's not just being able to recognize the scams, but to know the resources. Where do you report it? Should you report it? How can you get help? What other kind of resources out there? You know, and I think the key thing for them to encourage them to do this is to always remember that, you know, grandma and grandpa have that life savings. Maybe it may only be one of the grandparents that's still alive has that life savings. Well, if I'm a grandson, grandchild, family member, you know, that savings is basically going to be destined for me someday in inheritance. That's the way it usually plays out in households. So wouldn't you not consider doing all you can to make sure that that money is safeguarded within the family? That's family money. You do not want a con artist, a scammer, to all of a sudden grab all that money, persuade grandma or grandpa to turn it over without thinking, and now you have nothing. And there goes the money that maybe would have paid your college loans or help you put the down payment on a new home. So I think it really behooves any younger people that are in a household where, yes, you have elderly grandparents or even elderly parents, to really do all you can to make sure that you're in the loop, that you safeguard the family inheritance that's there, the family money, that you're aware of the scams, you're aware of all the resources, you're aware of how to report a scam or where you should report a scam within your local area, because every state is different. And I think that kind of encouragement and that kind of knowledge, I think, can go a long way.
Yeah, well, it sounds like at the core of it, it's about communication and having conversations is a big part of it.
Mm.
So, let's talk just real quickly about credit unions. That's your specialty. Is what role do credit unions and other financial entities have in educating their members and clients?
Well, I say, Tony, that they have a major role in this. And, I know there's a lot of friendly competition that goes on between banks and credit unions and all that. One's for profit, one's not for profit and all that. But aside from that, they are all financial institutions. People have trust in them because they take their life savings, their deposits, their money, and that's where they deposit it. They deposit it at the bank or at the credit union to safeguard that money, to manage it safely. So not only is that required of that financial institution, that bank or credit union, to safeguard that money, but I think it's also imperative that they take every step possible to safeguard that money from falling into the hands of a con artist, a scammer. And the reason I say that is that you'll hear in arguments a lot of times from people within the financial services industry. Well, hey, it's the customer's money. If they come in and they want $20,000, and we ask them what's it going to be for, and they hem and haw. Well, hey, it's their money. We have to give them their money. I go, stop. Wait a minute. They're trusting you with that money, and you realize that they're being scammed, that they're being manipulated. And first of all, in doing so, they are obligated in many states to report that to another agency because they are suspecting that this person is being manipulated. So they're required by law to report it. Now, with all that being said, I say that they do not give that money over under those circumstances, and they need to find ways and loopholes to prevent that from happening, because after many times you'll hear the stories, and I would say this is like 10 times out of 10, when a bank or credit union refuses to give the money over and really does help convince the victim that they are being manipulated by a scammer, that victim is so relieved and thankful that the bank or the credit union did not give them the money and protected them from turning it over needlessly to somebody like this where it's going to be lost forever. So I think if we look ahead, if the banks and credit unions look ahead at what happens when we don't turn it over, how grateful our customers are, and I think if we make it really known to the customers beforehand that in these circumstances, here's what your bank or your credit union is going to do to protect you. Everybody wants to be protected. No one in their right mind wants to turn over money to a scammer or a con artist. Come on, nobody. So if that is the case, well, then let's have the banks and credit unions work together to protect the consumers from losing all those thousands of dollars in life savings.
Definitely, yeah. And I think you said it is that they need to remember that a lot of them are mandatory reporters
Mhm.
when it comes to these things. But I think, here's another way to take a look at it. Is this what you would want for your parent?
Yeah.
If this was your mom or dad, would you want somebody to step in and help them?
Yep.
That maybe that's the way to look at it. So
Well,
oh,
I
sorry.
was going to say, but and the thing is that, and it gets me. I guess you can see how I get all worked up about this. But it gets me when you'll hear, and I've heard credit union people, well, it's their money. There's only so much we could do. We have to give them their money. Yeah, give them their money so that they could throw it in the fire and burn like $20,000. Give them their money when you know full well 100% that they're going to go and give it to a con artist and it's going to be lost, and then they're going to come back. Michelle Singletary of the Washington Post did a great series here a couple months ago about Scammed. And she interviewed a woman who was in her early 80s about losing almost $600,000 in a scam scenario that involved a fake FBI agent. So she interviewed her. She interviewed the manipulated or the victim's daughter. And even the daughter was saying that she could not believe the financial institution did not do everything it could, but just gave her $600,000. My God. And that's what I mean. This is like there's no excuses when it comes to a bank or a credit union. Just, well, it's their money and giving it over to the person so that they can lose it. That's not protecting the interests of their consumers.
Yeah, no, I'm with you as well. They have that obligation. So, let's switch gears. To wrap up, it's time for what I call the Get Ready Hot Take Trio. 3 quick questions to help our listeners shift how they think about money. The first one is, what money myth are you trying to break?
Well, I would say, there's a whole area here that we have to consider. And it goes back to maybe what I was saying earlier. When you're manipulated by a scammer, you're not really in your right mind. You're not thinking properly, right? You're reacting. You're in survival mode. So insisting that it's your money, what we're just talking about, and that you could do whatever you want with it really isn't true. So that's the myth right there, because everybody says it's my money. I could do whatever I want with it. Well, no. If somebody knows that you're not in your right mind, and I'm not saying that to be disrespectful, not being in your right mind is that you're reacting in survival mode to a threat without thinking and just overreacting. And you're going to give money away that you would never do when you're calm, collected, you're pausing, you're verifying. You would never do that. So that's a money myth that I think we have to get rid of.
I love that. I'm with you 100% on that. So the next one is, what is one simple thing people can do each year to build up their financial momentum and to stay guarded against scams?
Well, the way I see it, Tony, financial instruments, investments, and all, they're really highly sophisticated. So I think it's very important to become financially savvy, as I would say. Stay educated about finances. Stay educated about all the different instruments, financial instruments. Ways to save, how to invest, and all that. I think that all those are very, very important.
Yeah, I'm with you as well. Is the more you can be educated, and the simple thing that I always tell people: if you don't understand something, you shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line. If it's a complex
Well,
financial,
it's like the scammers today saying, all right, now take the money and go to this Bitcoin machine and you're going to deposit and buy Bitcoins. Some of these people are still writing checks at the grocery line and they're going to go and buy a Bitcoin. I guarantee you, my father-in-law, who's in his 80s, has no clue what the hell a Bitcoin is. So, it's really, we have to stop and think.
yeah, it's asking questions, stopping and thinking. So the final one is, what advice, if we got out the time machine, what advice would you give your younger self, knowing what you know now about money and scams? What would you do differently?
Oh, geez. Honestly, start saving from day one in your 401k. for your retirement savings, and try to save as much money from each paycheck as you can, because next thing you know it, you're going to become retired. You're going to become a senior citizen, and you're going to start to want to invest, or not invest, but I should say start to live off the funds that are coming from that 401k and from that savings. And if you don't really put the money away, or if you don't have much there, you're going to be really so wishing that you really did. Because when you get, you're not working anymore. Now you could travel, you could do things, you have a wonderful life. And if there's not much in the savings, you're going to be a little bit hampered from really enjoying life. So yes, it's start from day one with your 401k.
Yep. Day is the best day to start. So start
Exactly.
early whenever you can. So, Walt, to wrap up, what's your number one tip on changing the way we think about money, especially when it comes to protecting ourselves and our loved ones as we all age?
Well, money doesn't buy happiness. While we need to manage our savings and investments and stay educated and all that, we can't let our concern about money and all that consume our everyday life. Although making money and saving and managing our money is a priority, I don't think it should be the first and only kind of priority in our life. There are other priorities. You go over to Europe, or anyone going to Europe, immediately they're struck by how the folks over there, the culture, and in any one of those countries, their priorities are so different than those of us here in the United States. It's more about family. It's more about food in a lot of those places. I just was not too long ago all throughout Sicily, and the priorities of life are just so much healthier. There's not that pressure. Now, I'm not to say that we just don't put money away and just don't do anything. No, it's a priority, but it's where does it fall in our list of priorities? We all have a number of them, and I believe that we have to make sure it stays in an orderly fashion.
Yeah, well, it should just be part of it. It's a tool. So, Walt, where can people learn more about you, and where can they check out the One-on-One with Walt Laskos podcast?
All of that, Tony, is on my website, my business website, and it's laskoscommunications.com, LASKOS communications.com.
Fantastic. Well, and for everybody watching and listening, as always, there will be that link to Walt's website in the show notes, so you can go to the show notes, check that out. So, Walt, thanks for joining us today on the Get Ready Money podcast.
Tony, it was a pleasure. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning in to this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If today's conversation helped you rethink how you approach money, please be sure to subscribe and to share it with a friend. You can also visit tonystewart.com to join the Get Ready movement and get access to resources, tools, and insights to help you take control of your financial life. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.